All right, so I think the sections going forward from here is we've established now the literacies that a student is supposed to have in their possession, or skills they should have obtained embarking on a postgraduate research journey, which is either your honors, your masters, your doctoral. So at the different levels, you have different maturity, different experiences, levels of experiences. Also, the way in which we write when we are starting off as a novice researcher, as opposed to an experienced researcher being at a doctoral level. So 4.4 goes on to the actual drafting of the proposal. Okay, so how do you provide feedback to a student that has submitted a proposal and so on? So we will look at your various academic institutions. We will also look at I will explain to you how UJ's processes work. I've worked at DUT and UNISA, so I know their processes as well. But since I've been at UJ longer, so our process is firstly, when you obtain a student, let's take it from there, right? So a student wants to embark on obviously this research journey, generally on a master's or a doctoral level, right? Because at the honors level, it's part of the curriculum. Taught modules as well as you have a minor dissertation that you have to complete. So it falls as part of the syllabus. I was told by my previous head of department at the time that when a student does a master's and a PhD, it's generally like a privilege because you want to further, because not a lot of students come and do postgraduate studies, right? They go as far as an honors degree and that's it. It ends there. We don't really pursue a master's or PhD unless you're getting into academia. Then yes, you or you want it as a personal accolade. But a lot of industries do not want such highly qualified people because the thing is I was even told you overqualified with with the degrees that you have. So maybe as far as an honors or a master's, but not everyone goes as far as a PhD. So the process that we look at is before a student even registers, the student has to apply and they have to be selected. So we go through a screening process. So you are aware, you've been with me for a while now. I'm in the Faculty of Engineering. Um, and this is our process, right? And on application of for either the master's or the doctoral studies, because like I said, the minor dissertation is part of an honors degree, so you don't really apply for that research component. It's one of the modules within the degree. Um, so you submit a topic and you submit an intent of research, which is the proposal at this stage, but it's not a full proposal, which is your 10 to 12 page proposal that we are used to. It's something that's a bit shorter that just gives us brief introduction, problem statement or research gap, objectives of the study, and so on, right? So we have a template that the students will follow and they will submit it on application. So we haven't even gone to the registration process yet because we have to look at what is the topic that the student is embarking on, this type of study, and whether it falls under that particular domain or qualification, because our department has quality and operations management. So it's a separate quality program and a separate operations management program. So we have to look at now, obviously the two are interlinked. So you can use quality topics under operations management. So it crosses over. But we have to look at now, obviously, capacity. We need subject experts to be your supervisors. So we have to look at, and does that topic fall under that particular program, which is, or that field, which is operations management or quality engineering, which is what we offer. So these are the things that you look at. And we have what is called a department research committee, where all the senior staff, which is those that have from senior lecturer onwards, are part of the committee. So we go through a screening process for all these students. So the first thing that we do is, and then once the student submits a proposal, then you can start with them. They then get selected And then they are given a letter to say, okay, they need to come and register. They come and register. And that is where the journey starts with you as a supervisor, because you have been allocated a supervisor. Some students come in with recommendations of specific supervisors that they want. You sit with the student, you refine that proposal. So where we are today is we looked at the components of a proposal the last time, and we're looking at now providing feedback on that proposal. As I said, does it fall within that research area? In my case, like I said, operations management or quality. So either qualification. Does it fall within that domain? How much of knowledge does the student have in that domain? Because we also look at their background. We've had students that came from human resource, that even came from accounting or financial background and wanted to do operations management, but there was no link or tie in to operations management from those kind of disciplines. So it made it, those are the type of students that come and apply for it, right? Not type, but a few of the students that came in. It made it difficult, but we obviously have to reject students because it's not within that domain, right? And also remember, these are novice students coming in. So my question to you, as a supervisor or potential supervisor sitting here today, embarking on this postgraduate diploma in supervision, right? You are learning about how to guide the student in this research journey, right? So how would you provide, firstly, when they applied, or do they only submit a proposal after they've registered? You know, so let's take it from there. And then based on the proposal that you have now, you've been selected as a supervisor, student gives you some kind of work to say, this is what I'm proposing to do, the study I want to undertake. How do you provide feedback? Because remember, this is your starting point with the student. What's your process? What do you do? Anyone?
Prof, can I start?
Yes, yes. I was hoping either someone will put their hand up or, yeah,
Yes,
continue.
I just need to say something before I start.
Yeah.
I would love to congratulate you on what happened this last week in your
Oh,
life.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
My dean, I was, she was asking me how my course was going, and she said, "But she was there." He said, "No, it is. I was there." Will you please explain to us just in a second what this accolade was for?
Okay, so I'm heavily involved in, well, women leadership, right? So I've been on a lot of leadership courses and stuff. So we become part of these societies. And when you are part, so hers essay is higher education resource services, right? That's what hers stands for, and it's one of the societies. Funny you saying that, because I just got another nomination for Women in Stature today. I'll explain that to you as well. So basically, what happens is they recognize, so they follow you a lot. So you have to be like actively involved in the community and stuff like that. And they recognize your achievements. So also with me being the chairperson of our Women in Engineering, also international committees that I sit on, all the, so it's a lot about women in leadership. So what I've embarked on in the past 2 3 years is women in STEM, because engineering is such a male dominated field, right? So we were pushing more for the STEM careers and STEM education, getting the girl child, you know, to come in to enroll. And I've also started a student chapter within the faculty for our female students that are already enrolled in the faculty. We do outreach programs and stuff. So it's a lot of stuff that we're doing to push this initiative. So I got nominated to be for the awards, and then I made the top 5 finalists. So that is what you would have been seeing in the media and social media and stuff like that. Um, I didn't win it. There was an academic, so obviously I'm still building my portfolio. There's a lot more stronger candidates. I will eventually get there. It was a lady from UWC, also another professor with a much stronger, and then she won it. There was various other categories. So there's one right now as well. It's called Woman of Stature. You'll also see it on LinkedIn. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see there's a lot of work, all the work that I do in this particular area. So it's not really related to my field of study. It's also quality is a scarce field. I always mention quality engineering. I was the one that developed the first quality engineering qualification in Africa. And I just graduated a student as well, the first ever in Africa. So all that adds to my portfolio, and people recognize the achievements, and this is where we get the accolades and the awards. And just to be nominated was like, for me, it was just something, it was a great achievement. Would have been nice to
Very
win though.
proud of you.
Thank
Very,
you
very
so
proud
much.
to have you as our own professor. Prof, okay, you were asking about the how we go to work with
The
the masters.
proposal journey, yes.
Yes. We have the same process at UMP where we have a proposal of intent, and that will then determine who you are going to be given as a supervisor,
Yes.
unless you've asked to have a specific supervisor.
Yes. Same.
Right. So then after that, we start with our master's workshops. We have a weekly master's workshop, and we start right from the beginning because we know there are some students who haven't had the opportunity to really master the research methods and things. So it's not compulsory, but they can join if they like. So we start from the title, from how to try and find a topic, from the gaps in the. We do everything step by step by step.
Yes.
Now some students follow those steps. Others don't. They have their own way of working. We're never going to force a specific way to do it onto them, but that really, really assists. And of course, then as they send in the stuff, you helping them with the proposal. I always get in another reader, and then also the co-supervisor if I have one, and then we sit and we have a session together. And in the master sessions, we give them chances to share their titles, then
Yes.
share the basic research question, share the sub questions, and we try and analyze it to see how it's linked to the title. So we really concentrate on the golden thread throughout, from the title into the research questions,
Yes.
into the literature study, sort of that sort of thing. So that is basically how we do it.
Yeah, similar process. And then as a department, what we also do is so it's things that we learn from each other, right? So we also have what we call it like a colloquium that we do with the students. And recently we've been doing it online because our department, actually under the Faculty of Engineering, has the largest number of masters and PhD students. So on a given year, we sit on 100 and somewhat master students, and that's an intake every year. So you must know, returning students with the new students, we end up with like over 200 students at a given time in a particular year. PhDs, we have about the same. We're on about 760, 70. So it's quite large numbers, and capacity is also a problem because obviously you need the proper subject experts for that. So we started doing these online colloquiums that we call it. The school also, we fall under the School of Mechanical Industrial. They also. So we let the student draft a proposal, which we guide them on the topic, the proposal, and so on. You've given your subject expert, your supervisor, and so on. And then about a month or so after they've registered, where they're refining the proposal, we let them come in and present. Similar to what you're saying, in a group setting, come and present, because especially at a master's level, so we do a separate master's, we do a separate doctoral, because doctoral, they can actually self-manage, so they can work on their own and help each other and work in groups. But with the master students, obviously, as you mentioned, they need a lot more guidance, from the beginning, that whole golden thread, from even refining their topic and so on. So we let them present, and then we give them comments, we give them feedback on it, to refine their proposal, because then you have to submit the proposal and approval of title to Faculty Higher Degrees. That's our process. They approve the study and the student continues, right? Yeah, so we take them through that entire thing, and then all the supervisors, so it's a group of supervisors, co-supervisors, that come in, that will, once a student has presented, give you comments on how to improve and so on. right? So it's a lot of hands-on feedback and stuff like that. And it's proven to be quite helpful, but it's just tedious because, like I said, large numbers are not so easy to control, but we break them up into groups and try to manage it as much as possible. The doctoral students, on the other hand, which is much like what is in your notes, they say that they have a group where you're critiquing the students and the students are presenting. But with the doctoral students, you don't have to put that much effort because they will essentially help each other. They will critique each other's work and they will help each other. Reason being is they're a bit more advanced and a bit more experienced in this research journey. So we also get the doctoral students to kind of co-supervise as well on um, the master's students, so imparting their knowledge at that level. So I'm doing it. So when I was doing my PhD, I was co-supervising a master's, and we even allow our PhD students as well as postdoctoral students to supervise master's students. They have that knowledge. So I think the process is more or less the same. And then you have to critique and provide constructive feedback for the student. Because remember, that proposal essentially becomes their chapter one, which is the foundation, the roadmap for their entire research. Um, Before we move on to the next section, anyone else wants to weigh in on your processes? How do you provide feedback and how do you handle students coming in here? Remember, we are only on the proposal stage now, helping the student with the proposal. We haven't started any of the other chapters. Also, you have to analyze the way they write. Do they have the academic capacity? Do they have the literacy skills? Because now we got to take into consideration language, being bilingual, multilingual, how they write, how they read, the different paces in which they write, the different paces in which they read, the different styles in which they write and they read. So this is all that goes into when you get down to the nitty-gritty now, us writing. Anyone? Anything different that you do from what was just discussed?
Prof, I don't know if this would be any difference or in
Okay.
any way, but I just want to contribute. I think sometimes it's good to have a set template
Yes.
that helps you and helps your students know what to get into beforehand. So, for instance, ensure that they have a checklist for an introduction. You need to cover, the basis of providing context,
Yes.
telling us what to do, and then ensure that you've provided an outline, research question, aims, and objectives. And so that way, when you give the feedback, they know exactly which parts and what they did wrong. So if there is some sort of template or rubric, it's very helpful. And then also using things, which is now repetition of what I've said before, but having like your own legend and guide for quick comments for things that you've put into writing, perhaps
Yeah.
that may help them then fix it without having to be too long-winded. You can address a lot of issues if you have a legend.
Yes, no, definitely. We also have those, so on master's and doctoral level, we have specific templates, right? And it's much like what we covered in our last session, where it says the elements that go into a proposal. So if you have that and you have a structure, and like we said, we don't always want to force them because sometimes different academic institutions have their own templates. But when it comes to research, and especially on a proposal level, or when you're doing your chapter three, specifically those two chapters, it's kind of the same headings and subheadings and trend that you have to follow. I don't think it differs from institution to institution. You're following more or less the same because it's methodology you're going to use, the type of study you want to undertake. So we those templates definitely do have. Um, it forms a roadmap as to what you want to do, right? Thank you so much for that, Tony. So looking at assisting students now, to add flesh to the proposal skeleton. So they have this template, they have these guidelines, they have the sections that they know what needs to go into it. But you, as a supervisor, and much like what Yurika was also saying, how you guide them in designing and structuring the entire document. So, what I generally do is I give them that same template, generic layout of a chapter one, right, with headings, subheadings, how each section needs to interlink into the next section, if they're using diagrams and figures and photos, how is it linked to the study? Because a lot of students like to make it look nice by putting all these charts and diagrams and stuff, but it's of no relevance. It just looks nice, to have like a picture that's there or a diagram that looks nice, but it's not saying anything about the study. So it must be directly related. So these are the things that we need to assist students in when guiding them through writing, and also the style of writing. I remember when I first started my academic journey. I am saying academic because I started off as a senior tutor before I got full into research, right? And then from a senior tutor, I went to a junior lecturer. At that time, they were junior lecturers. And I had little to no background on research until I came to my BTech, right, at that time. And under BTech, we did what was a research methodology module. And then you had to do a proposal, because the output of that module was not an exam, it was a research proposal, right? So they took you through that entire stage. So that's why I say it's important for students to have that background, right? And then from there, we did what was called a 2-year BTech. So the second year is where you do the minor dissertation. Now you go out and conduct the study, but based on that proposal that you had passed in your research methodology, it's still part of the qualification. Started building on research, wasn't too into it because, again, novice researcher, still learning from the basics, and had to build myself up. When it came to me actually registering for the masters, and it was a full research masters because they are taught masters as well, it was a bit difficult for me to catch up at the level I was at BTech, and then we had a master's. So we didn't have that bridging of a postgrad or an honors in between. Because remember, the old convener technicons went straight from a BTech to an MTech, right? Now we changed the entire qualification structure where you have to have an NQF level 8 in order to go into a master's program. Yeah, it was difficult for me to catch up. And I learned this from my supervisor at the time. I was the first student that she had supervised. So she was fairly young as well. I was fairly young, learning, and she guided me through everything, giving me structures, giving me headings, subheadings. This is what you need to read. And remember, we were speaking about giving your students content, and a lot of content that they need to read just to get them started, because sometimes they don't know where to start when it comes to the actual reading and collecting of information to structure these chapters. So she was one of them that piled on a lot and gave me a lot of reading. But that guidance, giving, I think the structure, and I do this with my honor students today, I do it with master students as well. I give them that guideline, and I take them step by step through everything. How to write, how to each your paragraph, write a paragraph, because some you think students know how to structure sentences. Yes, they can, but not in a research setting. Because like we've been learning all this while in academic literacies, there's a style in which you have to write when it comes to academics and research. So I think those rubrics, those templates, those guidelines are very, very helpful. And it's helped a lot with guiding the students, because when they're novice, they need to be, like what we would say, spoon fed, everything given to them, or else they get completely lost. I mean, it's a lot of work on our side as supervisors, but it's stuff that we generally do over and beyond our call of duty to help these students get through, right? So that is assisting students to add more. So they have a structure. Now you need to start bulking up your introduction. What needs to go into it? How do you bulk up your research statement, your problem statement? Find a research gap and identify the problem that needs to be investigated. Those are the things you need to take your student through, and then obviously bring the meat into each of those sections, because we know what topics we want, what headings, subheadings, but putting the actual meat into it. Taking students' interim literacies into account, this is their capabilities, right? And we spoke about this where we were looking at their capabilities, what's their literacy levels, right? So obviously the different transitioning stages from going from school to a tertiary institution, how you write, how you read, how you evaluate, analyze, and so on, right? So we expect students to be a bit more advanced at this level coming into a tertiary institution, but they also limited with the knowledge that they have. You also have those vignettes that we went through, which was Serena and Adrina's, where we looked at their experiences. Can you remember their experiences with their supervisors? One, I think, was a midwife, if I'm not mistaken. Both were in the medical field. One wanted to knew what she wanted to write but didn't know how to write it, and the other one wanted to put more of personal experiences. Adrina wanted to put more of her personal experiences in there, right? So both two completely different styles of how they want to tackle their studies and how they want to write up their research. I'm hoping that you all remember that, but you can go back and read, right? Then you have before we go on to the next one. So also with those two vignettes that we spoke of with Serena and Adrina, it was also their voice, their literacy voice coming out, because they wanted to write in a certain way, especially with Adrina. Adrina just wanted to put in her personal touch and her personal experiences, because she also wanted the people that are reading her dissertation or her thesis get the word out there as to this is what was experienced and this is how you want to remedy that problem. So there was a genuine problem that was experienced, and how do we actually go about writing that? Assisting students with additional requirements for a proposal. So in this instance, right, when I have my students at the proposal stage, when they are finished with refining that proposal and we have a complete full draft of that proposal and study field has been approved, student continues with the study, I normally take the student through, and I think I showed you guys this, a research framework. And based on that research framework, then they start collecting information on those variables in the framework. It also helps them to determine the type of methodology they want to use or data collection tool they want to use to conduct the study. In order to determine the data collection tool, you have to look at what is your sample size. If you have a very small sample size of maybe 12 to 15, you can't use questionnaires because you're unable to quantify and you won't be able to measure reliability of that study, right? Questionnaires, the minimum number you're supposed to have is 30. For anything lower than that, you would do interviews, but interviews must not go more than 15. So these are the things you have to look at, and this is what you have to guide the student on, because these are the extra things that they also have to look at. So in that proposal stage, when you are drafting part of the methodology, they need to know what the sample size is. They need to know what is the types of sampling that they're going to use to generate the numbers or the number of responses that they have. So these are the things that we are looking at when it says adding additional requirements to the proposal. Also, if you're conducting interviews, what are the type of questions you're going to ask? And the more literature that you read when you are developing the proposal gives you an idea of the type of questions that you want to ask. Also, some of the articles that you read have examples of interview questions, have examples of questionnaires that help them to conduct the study. And it also assists in the student developing those type of questions. The questionnaires as well, there's a rubric that we use, a template that we use. Because we use SPSS and Excel, it needs to be coded. because you're quantifying information. So there's a lot of things that you need to guide the student on when they are adding these sections. And I think it's imperative that you don't wait until the student is at the data collection stage doing their write-up on a chapter 3. It needs to be done here at the proposal stage, because the template for a proposal does have a section that shows you a brief understanding of methodology and design. Everyone with me up until this point? Can I move on? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thank you. Okay. Then we move on to your activity 4.3. How have ethics committees responded to the ways in which questions have been formulated? So, part of or after the proposal stage, when we go through a bit of the literature review and so on, we have to have the study approved, have to have our data collection instruments, whether it is a questionnaire, whether it's interview questions, survey, focus groups, observation methods where you have to have a checklist, an observation checklist, whether you are taking out photos and so on to look at processes, which becomes part of observation. So those are the things you need ethical clearance on. The moment you have any human factor, you're in contact with someone, and especially with interviews, very, very strict, because you're always one-on-one, unless you're sending out Google Forms, but it's still human factor. The type of questions that you put in, also you have to get consent, because you have to have on a questionnaire, and for interview questions, you need to have a consent letter or consent form, because the participant needs to know their rights. So as a supervisor, you need to guide your students on the ethics process for your respective institution or your respective faculty. You have to take them through, this is the cover page, this is the consent forms you're supposed to have, these are the ethical principles that that govern the participant's rights. The participant, it's voluntary in process. The participant can withdraw from a study whenever they want. So these are the common things that we look at when it is ethics, when it comes to the ethics committee. So you as a supervisor need to guide the student on that. So activity 4.3 is, how have your ethics committee responded to the ways in which questions have been formulated and information briefing sheets, consent forms presented? The academic literacies elements of the application. So how you're writing the application, you as a supervisor has to take the student through those stages of preparing the documents to submit to the ethics committee so that you get approval for clearance to conduct your study. So it's how they write it. And you are very actively involved at this stage because it's the first time the student is applying for ethical clearance. By yourself or for your own research, what have you learned from these responses, and how will what has been learned influence the guidance to give your students? Write this in a paragraph. So if you've gone through the ethics process of your respective universities or faculties, what were some of the responses? For those of you, okay, I've got examples, but let's hear from you first. You submitting your students' work, the questionnaire, the interviews, participant statement, your consent forms. Sometimes you even get letters from the company where you are conducting the study to say that they've given you permission, right? All that needs to be cleared. How do you tackle that? Well, when you get the responses, what do you do with the responses? What are some of the types of responses do you get on the feedback of that submission? Do you get clearance immediately, or does it come back with revisions? Anyone?
I've had some come back that needed revisions.
Yes.
Sometimes you overlook little things like your alignment between your methodology and your study. I've always thought I've gone through everything in detail, and then somebody will pick up something somewhere.
Yeah, it always comes. You think you do a really good job, and then they will pick up something. I'll give you an example just now, but let's hear from anyone else who's been through this ethics process for a student or been through it yourself. you were doing the study, you doing your master's or PhD, and what was the feedback that you received, or what was the feedback you received from a student's work? Anyone? Tony?
Prof, this is a very peculiar area within my field of study because generally the kind of research we conduct has very little contact with vulnerable populations and general use of items that may need ethical clearance. So this has
Yes.
become a bit of a checklist exercise within our department, although we still try to consider whatever factors that may require some sort of acknowledgement of an ethics approval, even if it may not need the actual approval, but just some sort of ethical issues. So, for
Yes.
instance, if I may be writing about a certain issue that may certainly be read in a certain way, then I can indicate that the intent of this is to, research the matter objectively and not in any way, cause uproar and upset sensitive people. But generally, our students don't have instruments that may require ethical clearance.
Okay, so your process a bit more simpler than ours, in that you don't really have to go through that human factor, and because what they're asking here is in this assignment or this activity, how do you handle the type of questions that you put in? I'll give you an example because I just had one recently and it was rejected. It came back with major revisions, right? So there's a 2A, a 2B. 2A is minor revision, a 2B is major revision, and then there's a total rejection where you have to resubmit the whole thing, right? On one of the students, and some of the comments that came in. So we did a participant statement because they're conducting interviews, right? So obviously you have to be very careful about the ethical principles, how you're going to address in terms of autonomy, beneficence, and so on, right? How to handle due care, your interviewees, the type of questions in terms of even if it's a questionnaire, whether it's interview, you cannot ask about sensitive information these days: gender, race, ethnicity, even age, because they're calling it ageism now. So people are very sensitive about the information that they're going to divulge to you. So we were told, and StatCon is statistical counseling center that is part of UJ, which does the evaluation of our students' questionnaires, right? It's quantitative. It's qualitative. We use Atlas TI, right? And so the feedback that came on the major revision was the type of questions we were asking were leading questions, and we were like, no, but what are leading questions? No, the way it's structured. So I'm like, different people are reviewing different studies and not. So how do they know specifically? You're getting so many applications. How do they know the actual content of the work, right? But they actually do have subject experts themselves that sit on ethics. So um, and this is where I was told, and I mentioned about the participant may withdraw from the study at any time. So even if they're halfway through that interview and they feel uncomfortable and they don't want to continue, they have the right to withdraw. We say that participation is voluntary. It is voluntary. That's where we say consent form. You need to fill in, but even though the participant says they're consenting in the middle of it, if they don't want to, they can just opt out. They're allowed to. That's their participant rights. The type of questions that you asking these participants as well. So it's a lot of, like I said, if it's sensitive in nature, you got to be very careful to what you're asking, how you're asking it, unless it's directly related to your study. If you need to know the number of women that are on a manufacturing production line, then obviously, yes, you would look at gender, right? Because your study includes females, so you will look at gender. But how you ask the question, because I just did this now, so I'm um, crazy enough to do a second PhD, which I'm almost finishing. So one of my questions on there was about the gender, right? Because we looked at women in leadership as well. So what do you put under that particular question? That's why I'm saying the questions we're asking. So I put it as male, female, prefer not to say, and then other. And they told me that I was not supposed to, I shouldn't put it as, multiple choice. I leave it as an open-ended question where the participant will themselves write male, female, prefer not to say, other, or whatever type it is, binary, non-binary, gender fluid, all, etc., etc., right? So you leave it as an open-ended question, and if they're comfortable enough to put it in, they can put it in or leave the question blank. Or I should just leave it out of the study completely. The same happened with ethnicity and stuff like that. So these are the type of questions and how you word it and write it, and with your ethics, the feedback that you get. Eureka?
What has been very difficult here, Prof, is that I'm on the UMP Ethics Committee as well. And what one faculty will sort of accept, another one won't, like what you've just said with your situation. It is incredibly difficult, especially when it comes to having to sort of include tribal leaders. It makes it so difficult. It's one of the biggest stumbling blocks in research, is trying to make sure the ethics is correct. And there are various interpretations. I've attended how many courses now, and they all have different ideas. They're not always the same.
Yeah, no, most definitely. But yeah, as you're saying, it's different for the different ethics, and it's even the different types of studies that you are undertaking. How you write those questions, like I said, that they can be offensive, they can be intimidating. Even when you're conducting an interview, you can come across as intimidating the participant, and the participant can say, listen, I'm not comfortable with this. I can withdraw from, I want to withdraw from the study. Yeah, so these are the kind of things that we're looking at. So activity 4.3 was writing a paragraph on how you respond to the feedback that you get from the ethics committee on the type of questions and things that you put in your ethics application. All right, think you'll be able to handle that? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, thank you. So moving on, 4.4, still continuing. This is something that we just touched on now, which is drafting and crafting of the proposal. So once the student and the supervisor are satisfied with the proposal write-up, then we have either an oral defense or written presentation, how you present the work. And generally we do this, we call it a proposal defense, which is after the colloquium, because you would have refined your proposal by then. It would have been approved by Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. And then you're defending your work now, right? The proper proposal that has been structured and approved. And then you appoint, or you have someone that will formally assess the proposal. In this case, it goes through our research committee, as the departmental research committee, goes through Faculty Higher Degrees, and it goes through an oral defense. So students can still improve and get feedback on the content of that research proposal. Then it says, in order to present what needs to be in a proposal, I think we all know title or topic is very important. What is the background introduction of the study, your aims and objectives, research questions, as well as knowing what the research gap is and why you're investigating this, the problem that exists that led you to want to conduct this study. Eureka?
Sorry, I'm hogging this whole meeting, but I
No,
was
it's
just
fine.
thinking of UJ's wonderful visualize your dissertation, or visualize your thesis.
Yes.
I love that concept, and I wondered if that couldn't be a form of research proposal presentation.
It can, because we actually have that 3-minute thesis presentation, dissertation and thesis, where the students, so they've made it into like a competition as well,
And the visualize
and
one as well. The
as well,
visualize,
yes.
yeah, I think it's
So
amazing.
even
So
with our our school colloquium, we started doing that as like a competition. So it motivates the students so that you want to write better and put better stuff, structure it so that you know at the end of it, yes, there's an incentive, which is, you know, you win a prize and stuff based on that proposal. So yeah, there's a lot of initiatives that are there. There's also a lot of, like I said, there's a writing center and there's writing workshops that the Academic Development Center sends out, as well as the research office, on not just proposal writing, but every stage of your research, your literature review, your methodology and design, how to even structure your sections for your chapter 4, how to do your analysis of your data and so on. So it's fairly helpful, right? To have these workshops. Visualizing your thesis is something that's brilliant. I try to also be part of that and take part of that competition, but I missed the deadline for it. Yeah, so all these things really do motivate students and help them a lot better. And having this oral presentation gives you more visual because you're doing a PowerPoint, you're showing others that it's visually appealing. This is the research that wants to be undertaken, and it's not only just a narrative. That is why I said those frameworks are so important. Those conceptual frameworks are so important because it builds that roadmap for the rest of your entire dissertation or thesis. And then obviously the structure that you need to follow for a written version of your proposal, then the final stage of your proposal, which forms the basis of your entire research report, which leads to a dissertation or thesis. Which brings us to activity 4.4. Consider the guidelines provided above, which indicate that the postgraduate proposal presenters are required to do what they are required to do at some universities. Do you agree or disagree with the points made in these guidelines? What would you add or subtract or modify? Post your response in the form of a 1-paragraph response in how you would guide them. So like I mentioned, our processes as a faculty, we go through this colloquium, they do this oral presentation, provide us with a roadmap of their study. And for you, you need to now, in a 1 paragraph, having read everything that the student needs to have in order to be guided on writing the proposal, are there things that you think we should be adding? Do you think there's more stuff that the student would need to present their work? Anyone? Tony? Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I just wonder, Prof, if the categories that we have in place are sufficient to actually get a sense of whether the student understands what they are doing. So, for instance, when we look at the literature review, it's a good place to get a sense of whether the student has read. But when we look at helping students develop novel ideas and creative ways to solve problems, I don't know if the proposal does enough to supplement the student's development there. It's either you have it or you don't. And I think, leading up to that, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of legwork that the supervisor has
Yes.
to do, that is not obvious for everyone. So I think there's just an element that becomes a shock for a lot of students when it's like, okay, so what is new? And you actually aren't expected to come up with a brand new thing all the time. But if your supervisor
No.
explains
Yeah.
that there's ways of developing novelty, there's ways
Yes.
of establishing your own voice, even within the literature, then it would be much clearer. But these things are just categories that are given with not a lot of explanation, not a lot of details. I don't know how all templates are, but just I think an example maybe within the template, it might make the template very long, but something that exemplifies it.
Yes, no, definitely. It gives you more of a guidance and more detail in it. Yurika?
Thank you, Tony, because that is very true what you said. I have noticed something very different. Because we have older students doing masters,
Yes.
we often find that some of them do not have a clue how to do a PowerPoint presentation. So
Yeah.
that is their biggest fear, how they're going to do the presentation. So I have a session with them.
Yes.
Not all of them, but there are a few of the older people that I get into my office and we work on it. They really don't know how to do it. So that needs to maybe also be considered.
No, definitely, because I've experienced that as a supervisor. So, from personal experience, you've got to teach them how to do PowerPoint presentations. They may have done it maybe years ago, and because they're adult learners now, you got to take them through basics. It's not like they don't know how to do PowerPoint. They do very nice PowerPoints, but to do the actual presentation and also what information goes on the slides that needs to be presented. Because remember, you're not guiding your students, and I've had a student that did over 30 somewhat slides, and you must know the presentations are only about 10 minutes, right? 10 to 15 minutes, you dealing with about 50 odd students or 60 odd students, right? So your time is limited as well. You need to guide them on what to put on the slide, how much of information to put on the slide. Because if you're not guiding them and cutting off at some point, you're going to end up with 30, 40, 50 slides and they're just reading, and where does it stop? So I think that is where we need to also guide them on how they do that presentation and what information they should be presenting to defend this proposal. Yes, Tony?
Yeah, just the final point, which I picked up in my time working with students at the
Yes.
postgraduate school, is that another thing I was told is that sometimes students are too precious about the research, and this is not communicated in any sort of template or anything, where they want to solve everything with one dissertation or one minor dissertation. And this then makes them want to do a lot more than they can chew off, or perhaps
Yes.
they are too broad in their approach to a research project, which should actually be very finite and limited. And so a lot of students, I realized, were doing like proposals for extended periods of time because the feedback they were receiving seemed offensive to them, seemed like it was removing them from their purpose, if I could say it that
Yes.
way. And
Yeah.
they were just too precious about it. And at the end of the day, I think students need to understand that the proposal and the research has to fulfill a function, and the function is
Yes.
something finite. It's not something that will change the world within one dissertation. Yeah.
No, more definitely, because I've also experienced that where students want to go in a certain direction, right? And you are guiding them, yes, well and good. And obviously, you need to stick to the context of that study, right? Um, a lot of the times, and my students, I was even called, someone actually told me that I was a horrible supervisor. And the reason why, and this was I think last year sometime, and the reason why she called me a horrible supervisor was because I kept making her do corrections on the proposal. Took us, like you said, sometimes you take a longer time with a specific student. One may push it out in a month, the other takes about 6 months or even longer. We had students in our department that were sitting on a proposal for 1 year, never got past the proposal stage. And I kind of got frustrated in that I'm guiding the student, but the student does not want to follow instructions, does not want to improve on the proposal. They were set in, and it's obviously they're novice, it's the first time they're writing, and they're making a lot of mistakes. But you've also got students that are so headstrong in that I want to do what I want to do, you know and they don't take the feedback well because they see it as something negative, but it's actually feedback is not negative. It's supposed to be there for improvement. It's supposed to help them improve on the proposal. But like I said, you get these students that don't take kindly to feedback. Then it ends up being this conflict between the supervisor and the student, because you're not seeing eye to eye and the student doesn't want to do the work. Then I even had a student where the corrections came back from an examiner, and it was not major corrections. Student passed very well, but tells me I'm not willing to do this corrections because I know what I'm doing in my study and I don't agree with what the exam. I'm like, yeah, but this is an examiner. So I was put in a situation where I didn't even know at that time how to even answer, because I know that you're supposed to address the comments from the examiner. There's a certain process we have to follow, that the results need to get approved. Now here's a student that tells me I'm not doing the feedback, I'm not doing these corrections because I don't agree with the examiner. So I had to go to the vice dean of research, and then the vice dean is like, yeah, but the student passed. I was like, yes, but we have to submit the documents where he does the corrections, or else the results don't get approved if the corrections are not done to the satisfaction of the supervisor and the faculty higher degrees. So it kind of put me in a bit of a predicament. And then that's when the vice dean told me, we have to sit with the student. We sat with the student, he got involved, and eventually we got the student to do the corrections. I understood the need for the corrections. There's obviously reasons why we have experts in the field and why certain corrections need to be done. But these are the things, that hiccups that come up where students actually don't want to do the corrections or don't want to follow instructions. And yeah, it puts you as a supervisor at risk, and then it puts that relationship you have with the student at risk as well. Okay. Um, so that activity, we said, looking at what do you think needs to be added, which takes us to 4.5, assisting students to respond to informal and formal feedback on their academic literacy elements of a proposal. So whether it's a proposal or throughout the entire journey of writing this dissertation or thesis, you have to take the student through, because I've noticed, and I don't know why students take this so personally, they don't like constructive criticism. They don't take very well to the feedback that they get, and obviously we're giving them this feedback before it goes to exams, because obviously we are examiners ourselves. We supervisors, we examiners, some of us are students also. We know the process. Okay, we're not perfect, we don't know every single thing, but we kind of know the process, and we know the type of things that examiners look for. So when you're supervising a student, you're going to supervise them in such a way that it leads to a successful exam, because we know what supervisors are looking for. So how do you take students through either a formal or informal process of tackling the feedback that they get? Because like I said, I had a lot of conflict with a one particular student who told me I'm horrible, and that, they refused to do, and we couldn't end up finishing that study. We actually didn't finish that study. The student ended up getting an F7 because he disappeared for about a year, and then he came back, and that was it. He wanted to continue, and the faculty didn't allow him to continue because he already had that F7 and he didn't appeal. And yeah, we had to go through that whole F7 is when you're in the system for too long. You have a minimum time to completion, and he's overwent that. And plus, he disappeared for 1 year, meaning that he didn't register that year. He didn't even formally take a leave of absence and stuff. So the year got added on as an academic year. So it caused a lot of problems. So this is what we're talking about, taking the student, guiding them on how to handle constructive criticism, constructive feedback. And it's not only giving criticism, um, where to improve, but if a student needs to be praised, and if they wrote a certain section perfectly and it should be praised, needs to be praised, because then it also boosts their confidence and motivates them now in the study or in this journey, taking them along that path where praise their ability. They wrote a particular paragraph in a certain way that was brilliant, brilliantly structured, brilliantly referenced, and so on. Commend your student, praise them. So it's not only about just giving the constructive criticism, right? And the constructive feedback. I'm not going to say criticism, because we don't always criticize our students. We're always giving them information so that they improve. And then obviously you have to look at certain deadlines that need to be met. Like we said, it goes through those stages, it goes through faculty higher degrees, ethics committee, and so on. So you have to have deadlines, submission dates for your students, and make sure that they adhere to these dates, because we have faculty high degrees and ethics committee every month. So you miss one, you got one the next month. But ensure that the student doesn't stay in the system too long when it comes to a proposal, because you can't, at a master's level especially, you cannot go more than 6 months on a proposal. On a PhD, we have not longer than 9 months, but that's also wasting a lot of time just writing a proposal when more of the work needs to be done. Any questions up until this point, and then we look at the next assignment and what needs to be done? All good? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Constructive criticism made you cringe. I know the feeling. It kind of that is why I think my students felt like they were attacked, because they lose that confidence in their ability to write, because they feel they're not good enough. But it's got nothing to do with that, and that is why I always sit with my students and I was like, no, we're giving you. So because I'm in a quality field and we look at what is called continual improvement, getting this feedback is continually improving on the work that you're doing, continually improving on the way you write and present your work. Because if you want to go to a PhD level, if you want to get into academia, do more research, these are what you need. These are the things you need to follow to make yourself a better writer, have better academic literacy skills. All right, assignment 4. And then we're going to take a few minutes break, about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to unit 5. Assignment 4, evaluate a reader's report on a research proposal. You have choice 1 or choice 2. So read the guidelines to readers. That is a formal assessor or master's research proposal, the reader's report on a proposed study provided below. Then do the following. Note which comments in the report relate to academic literacies in terms of reading, writing, organization, and presentation of the work. Write a commentary not more than 1,000 words in which you respond to the report writer's comments in terms of how they guided the student and supervisor and what needs further work, tone of the work, clarity of comments, recognizing that you do not have the student's proposal to assist you, and anything else that you would like to question, approve, or disapprove. Alternatively, the second choice would be use the guidelines in the discipline of the assessment of a proposal and an example of a proposal reader's report to do the same task listed in choice 1. So you are going to read. Okay, so these are the research proposals that are given to you. And you're going to analyze, agree, disagree, approve, disapprove, using either choice 1 or choice 2 to critically analyze the style in which these proposals were done and the feedback that was given on these proposals, and how do you think it was addressed, and do you agree with how it was addressed? Think you'll be able to handle that? And then also bear in mind the rubric that is available for marking of these assignments. Hands up, hands down. I think as supervisors, potential supervisors, being supervised, having supervised, you can analyze reports, you can analyze the comments, because you as a supervisor have given your students comments. So you know what is right, what is wrong, or not what is right, what is wrong, what should be approved, what shouldn't be approved, what should be modified, and so on. So that is what the assignment is based on. Any issues, consultation, contact me via email. We'll set up consultations and so on, right? But I think you guys are working fairly well in groups right now. Lorenzo, if you can hear me, I'm not sure I'm going to finish the whole of Unit 5. I think because of the setback with me not having that lecture on Thursday because of my awards, I may need next week, Thursday, if that's going to be possible and it doesn't clash with any of the students' other modules. So if you can please just come back to me on that one. I think Thursday is the 12th of September.
Okay, no problem, Prof. If no students, all the students are fine with that, then I can always send out the Teams invite. Should I email the class individually, or would we just want to
Set it
find
up
out?
like how you've set up the Teams invite on the 12th at this time, same next week, this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Just to do a catch up, some revision and stuff like that, and for me to finish off whatever I don't finish now. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording for now. I'll start recording again. Can we take about a 10-minute break and then we be back? So it's 18:06. Let's be back at about 18:16. Is that fine? All right.